Let's talk about the diet piece from that perspective of somebody that's obese or type 2 diabetic. So they have a ton of extra weight on them. You mentioned quickly there the fact that they don't want to focus on exercise in the beginning. And we've talked about the knob for carbohydrates, and you've given the spectrum of different dietary options. But let's talk to that person that's really determined right now and they want to make big dietary changes. It sounds like carnivore would be the move for that person because it's the most extreme the one way. But for somebody that is just getting into this, there might be something for doing it more gradual. So what I'm getting at is for the beginner, somebody who is going to make a big dietary switch, at least in the long run, how do they begin to move down that continuum?
Great question. So first and foremost, you need to understand the reason that Nisha, my wife, and I named this a proper human diet is because we don't want there to be any misconception that this is a weight loss diet or this is a quick fix. There is no such thing, okay, in reality. We'd love for there to be, but there is no such thing. What you have to come into this understanding is this is the way I'm going to eat for the rest of my life. This is a proper human diet. This is a species-specific diet for me. This is how I should have been eating all along. And many people say, well, how long do I have to do this before I can, add some, and what they mean is junk back in. It's like, well, you can add junk back in anytime you're ready to start slowly poisoning yourself again. But I would highly recommend you stick to a proper human diet for the rest of your life if you'd like to live a proper human life, which means you're virile, vigorous, potent, mentally acute, mentally alert, aggressive when it's called for, patient and stoic when that's called for. All those things become much easier when your body's not inflamed and your brain's not inflamed. And so for many people, they'll jump right in, full bore carnivore. I don't advise against that. I think the carnivore diet is the most excellent elimination diet on the planet. But for many people, they don't need to do that because if they do that, they'll fail. And there's several reasons for that. Probably the most prominent reason is carbohydrate withdrawal symptoms. And so many people think that the standard American diet, there's nothing really wrong about that. I'm just eating too much. There's nothing bad about that. I've just been a glutton. My contention is no, there are several things that are bad about the standard American diet. When you go to the middle of the grocery store and you buy food from the middle aisles, which is where they put the food that they make the highest profit on. There are several things about that are unhealthy by definition. Maybe not by design, but by definition, they're unhealthy. They're inflammatory and they're high in carbohydrates. They're full of either naturally occurring or added sugar. They're full of grains, which every human on the planet has some degree of inflammatory response to any of the grains without exception. Or they've got vegetable seed oils, which human beings have only been eating for the last 100 years. And so again, back to that ancestral component, never in our history has the predominant fat in our diet been a vegetable seed oil or a plant butter or any of that kind of crap. That is a new technology that is being experimented in humans with. And I think we're seeing the results of that experiment with the epidemics of obesity, fatty liver, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes. And so I think some people should come into this slower. Maybe they should dip their toe into low carb and try to keep their total carbohydrates under 100 total grams of carbs a day. Not net carbs, because people who make highly palatable foods, they want to talk about net carbs because they know they can hide lots of carbohydrates in that calculation. So count total carbs. And really try to focus on one ingredient, whole, real foods. That's real food. That's what we've eaten for millions of years, not processed stuff that came from a factory, not powdered stuff. And so then after a while on low carb, you can go to 50 total grams a day or less. You can kind of move around on that spectrum once you've gotten in there, but you need to realize that spectrum is where human health is. If you want human health, that's where it's at. It's not the latest fad diet. And so whether you come at this full bore or whether you come at this in a graduated fashion, like I'm going to do low carb for a couple of months, then I'm going to try keto, see how it goes. Either of those is a fine strategy depending on your personality. I think that's very important as well. But realize that carbohydrate withdrawal symptoms is a very real thing. Sugar addiction withdrawal symptoms is a very real thing. And so most people have somewhere between 3 and 14 days of flu-like symptoms when they cut the carbs out, especially the highly processed carbs, because they are addicted to that. They have used those highly processed foods as a dopamine hit for long enough, for enough years, that when they stop eating those foods and they have that swing in dopamine levels, you can feel kind of blah, feel kind of down, feel kind of just not good. You can have all of the withdrawal symptoms that you would have if you were stopping smoking, or you were stopping alcohol, or you were stopping some other illicit drug. You will have body aches. You could feel like you're coming down with the flu. You could have trouble sleeping, or you could be somnolent during the daytime. You can have mental fogginess, all these things. And so people name this the keto flu. I think that's a misnomer. I think you should call it what it is: carbohydrate withdrawal symptoms. Anybody who's tried keto is like, I couldn't do that. I felt like crap. Get on the internet and look up, what are the symptoms of nicotine withdrawal? What are the symptoms of alcohol withdrawal? And what you're going to find is that your carbohydrate addiction withdrawal symptoms mimic that list almost exactly. You're going to be irritable. You're going to be grumpy. You're not going to feel good, all those things. And I think that is for many people, that's a wake-up call. When they're like, I don't think I'm addicted to Lucky Charms. I just think I like them a lot, right? But when you stop them and you go through this period of, damn, I'm literally withdrawing from Lucky Charms and all the other foods that the American Diabetes Association and the Tufts School of Nutrition tell me are really good foods, I'm actually withdrawing from them. That's probably not a good sign that they're actually the proper food for me. And so if people know that going in, Jesse, they know that up front, I'm probably going to withdraw from this. Then they're prepared for that. They're also not misled by influencers out there who would love to say, see, that's not good for you. See how bad you feel? You need to get off this immediately. You need to go back to eating the foods that I endorse and the highly processed, protein bar, which is really a carbohydrate bar. You need to go back to eating that. And because as soon as you go back to eating that, you'll feel better again. And you will feel better again, because that's well known in the addiction model, that if someone who hasn't smoked for 4 days, they're going to feel like crap. But if they smoke a cigarette, guess what? They feel better. Does that mean they should just give up and go back to smoking? Of course not. The alcoholic, after 3 days of no alcohol at all, is going to feel yucky. Does that mean they should go back to drinking so they feel better? Obviously, the answer is no. And so many people aren't aware of the carbohydrate sugar addiction model. But once they get that under their belt, and once they understand this is a way of eating, this is lifelong. If you want good health until being very, very, very old, you need to eat this way. When you get those two concepts under your belt, all of a sudden this becomes almost self-evident. This is the way I need to eat, and I need to push through those carbohydrate withdrawal symptoms. Push through those for 3 to 14 days until I get on the other side of those symptoms. Because on the other side of those symptoms, that's where good health is.
So other than giving people the heads up that they're going to likely suffer with these carb withdrawals and going slow into cutting back the carbs, anything else they can do if they are making this dietary switch to ease that period of time?
Yeah. So make sure that you're getting plenty of electrolytes and minerals. Make sure that you're getting plenty of salt. I'm not a big endorser of products because I'm not here to make $1 million. I'm here to try to improve the metabolic health of 1 million people. But these two I do talk about sometimes because they will give you the electrolytes and the minerals that your body needs. That will decrease the symptoms of carbohydrate withdrawal. It's not going to eliminate them, but it's going to make them less severe. Getting plenty of salt in your diet. And I've got multiple YouTube videos talking about salt's not bad for you. If you salt your food to taste, there's going to be no negative health effects from that. Every mammal on the planet, without exception, seeks out salt and preferentially will lick certain muds or certain rocks that are high in sodium and chloride. These things are mandatory for proper mammalian health. You have to have salt, and this is one of the reasons people on a low salt or no salt diet feel miserable, is because their body is suffering because they don't have enough salt. But for the carbohydrate withdrawal Get plenty of electrolytes, get plenty of minerals, get plenty of salt, get plenty of sleep, of course. Try to be a little more active, always keeping in mind where you're at on your journey. And then eat when you're hungry and eat until you're full. A proper human diet allows you to do those things. And for many people out there, they're like, no, dude, you don't understand. If you tell me to eat until I'm full, I'll weigh 800 pounds. Yeah, eating the highly processed crap, you will. Yes, definitely. But eating a proper human diet that adheres to all the principles of a proper human diet, you now get to eat until you're comfortably stuffed, just like every other wild mammal on the planet does on a daily basis, whether food is scarce or whether food is plentiful. They never get obese unless it is part of their annual cycle where they're going to go into hibernation. Then what do? They up the carb intake. They up the sugar intake so they can develop fatty liver on purpose, develop a thick layer of body fat on purpose, and then go into hibernation. That's literally the only mammals on the planet that become obese if they're eating a species-specific diet, right? Now, if they have access to human garbage dumps, they can get really fat. But if they're eating their proper ancestral diet, they don't get obese unless it serves their needs as a species on an annual basis.
So we know salt, when somebody is transitioning their diet, can be a good hack to help with that transition. But salt in a general sense, for somebody out there who has, say, made the dietary shift and they've found their comfortable level of carbohydrates, how do they know they're getting enough salt on a regular basis? Do they just salt their food to taste and that's good? Or are you somebody that advocates, supplementing with salt on top of that? Or how do you go about figuring that out?
There's this new instrument that has just been invented. I've got an affiliate link. We'll post it down below. It's called the human tongue. Oh, it's not new. It's been around for millions of years. So salt to taste is my principle. And I think for 85, 90% of people, salting your food until it tastes perfectly salted. That's the way you're going to know, because if you need more salt, you're going to crave salt. If you're eating too much salt, salt's going to taste too salty. And Nisha and I, we've got a 3-year-old and a 7-month-old running around the house, and we have salt rocks that I'll just leave it laying on the floor. And we're also not germaphobes. You'll find that out if you delve into our personal life. But Bonnie will crawl by the salt rock some days. She's 7 months old, Bonnie Blue. She won't touch the salt rock, but other days she'll pick that salt rock up and she'll lick it for 3 minutes. And then she'll put it down and move on. And I think that perfectly mirrors every other mammal's behavior on the planet, and also mimics our behavior hundreds of thousands of years ago. And so many doctors and dietitians, if they have not studied anthropology and paleoanthropology, they're like, what do you mean we need salt? What do you mean people have gone out of their way to get salt? I don't even know what you're talking about. Salt is bad. The American Heart Association says we need to eat a low salt diet. How can you even argue with them based on some appeal to nature that every mammal on the planet seeks out salt, and so did we. So in my study of anthropology and paleoanthropology and reading explorer accounts from the 16 and 1700s, every Aboriginal population that they encountered, without exception, did two things. When they killed a mammal, they never drain the blood and waste it. Either they don't drain it at all, therefore the meat and all the tissue is still full of the blood. But the majority of the time, they actually capture the blood and they use the blood. And there, in some countries, there's still, in Poland, you can get blood soup. In many different cultures, there's still blood on the menu. But in America, where Kellogg's and Kraft and Kraft Heinz and Mondelez and other billion-dollar corporations are in charge of our food supply, blood is gross. Blood is perhaps a sin to even eat blood. You want to avoid blood at all costs. You don't even get it on your hands, much less eat it. But our ancestors did not have blocks and tackle that they could hoist a 3,000-pound megafauna up and drain it after they killed it. The blood was still in there. And in many cases, they went out of their way to capture the blood and either drink it immediately or use it to cook with or to store it for later use, because guess what blood is very, very rich in? Salt and electrolytes. right? And so, without exception, when you see an explorer encounter an indigenous population that has not been touched by modern society at all, they're always eating the blood. They're either drinking it or they're cooking with it, they're saving it, they're using it. In some cases, they fertilize their crops with it. So then all that nutrition's now in the plants, right? But they were getting salt and electrolytes on a daily basis because blood was part of their daily diet. And if you haven't really made a study of this, that is not something that you would expect. You would think, yeah, there's some weird cultures that eat blood or whatever, but that's rare. No, it was ubiquitous before the 1700s. Every indigenous species or tribe or collection of people that we encountered, they were eating blood without exception. And often only when they were made to stop doing that because they were taught that that was a sin or they were taught that it's dangerous or unhealthy or gross. Only then begrudgingly would they stop eating the blood. And so, if you tell somebody in modern society, Jesse, oh, you need to start eating blood, they're going to be like, dude, what? That's kooky. That's too much. And so that's the only reason that I help Keto Chow design the electrolytes and minerals is because it's currently Overton's window is shifted far too far into everything needs to be sterile and everything needs to be made in a factory. It freaks people out. And so people aren't ready to hear that message yet. And so let's move Overton's window just a little bit and let's talk about minerals and electrolytes. Let's talk about salt. And then when they're used to that, I think naturally people say, well, I wonder where people got electrolytes and minerals and salt. Well, they were drinking groundwater, number one, which I don't advise today because our systems are too fragile. We can't tolerate the parasites that might be in, the creek water on my farm. Although I am going to start experimenting with it and share that and see how that goes. Also, we never drink groundwater. We never eat blood ever, and so we've lost the two major ways that we used to get minerals, electrolytes, and salt in our diet. So we've got to replace that artificially for now. But hopefully one day when there are enough regenerative farmers and regenerative ranchers out there raising animals and plants properly again, we won't need these products at all. It'll just be in the food again like it used to be.
And Ken, are you somebody who goes right back to the source and consumes blood as part of your diet?
Not yet, but we're currently running sheep, quail, chicken, turkey. I'm about to get some Idaho pasture pigs for the farm, and we are absolutely have full intentions of implementing blood back into our diet, as all of our ancestors did for the last 3.5 million years. It seems gross by modern standards, but it's actually ancestrally appropriate. And it's actually what every single one of your ancestors, you watching this right now, listening to this, every single one of your ancestors before 15,000 years ago ate meat and ingested blood and drank groundwater. There was no alternative. You either did that or you starved to death. And so the reason that's so important is that's the diet we evolved on for at least the last 3.5 million years. That diet is what made us what we are. That's why it's important. This is not just an appeal to nature, which is a logical fallacy. I'm not appealing to nature. Oh, it's natural. Not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is evolutionary. This is ancestrally appropriate nutrition for the human organism.
And you mentioned the fact that groundwater these days isn't safe, but what about bottled water, mineral waters like Pellegrino and some of the better quality ones out there that are in glass? Can we get some of that salt and other minerals by consuming those?
A microscopic amount. If you look at the nutrition data on these mineral waters, first I would try really hard to find one that's very, very low in fluoride or fluoride free. I think that's a big deal that doesn't get talked about enough. But what we do is we'll make reverse osmosis water here at the house. We've got an under sink model, and then I'll add some electrolytes and minerals to it. So we basically clean the water that's been dirtied by modern technology, and that's a whole podcast on its own. How atrocious some of our water supplies are, and then we put the minerals and electrolytes back in. And we sometimes put that in our soda stream, so it's now sparkling. Sometimes we just drink it still. But also, I'm a great fan of Gerald Steiner of Topo Chico, since they fixed their plastic tubing issue and the PFASs are out of there now, hopefully. At least that's what their press release said. Even Perrier, all of them. I try to get them in glass if I can, because I think ingesting too many nanoplastics and microplastics, I think that's probably a big thing. Although we don't have the research to prove it yet, I think they're now finding nanoplastics in amniotic fluid in pregnant women. They're finding nanoplastics in breast milk. It has not been proven dangerous yet. It has not been proven bad, but I think there are probably, it'd probably be difficult to get research money to do a big causation study for that, because there are too many billions of dollars being made on the back of plastic, which is a petroleum product. Probably going to have trouble getting your department head to sign off on such a research study. And so, we go back to the ancestral principle. When did we start consuming lots of nanoplastics and microplastics? 50 years ago. Before that, did we ever consume them? Absolutely not. 0%. Before really 50 or 100 years ago, it was not a thing on this planet, but now it's ubiquitous. That's probably a problem. And so I love Gerald Steiner and Topo Chico and San Pellegrino and Perrier. I try to always get them in glass bottles. And I think you mentioned that as well.
For somebody who is making the changes we're talking about today, and they're going to limit some of these toxins, including the plastics, that's all fine and good from here forward. But what about all the accumulation from the environment to this point? And we're going to get more into the diet piece here, but is cleaning up the diet and cleaning up the environment enough to let the body detox what's already been built up? Or for somebody that is jumping in, like we're talking about here, and say there's somebody who has all that extra weight, or they don't, and they're just cleaning up their life, do you recommend any kind of detox to get to baseline, or how do you go about looking at that?
So I think there is a degree of detoxification that happens. I do not think that any detox product on the market is necessary. I think they are 100% uniformly a waste of people's money. And if resources are limited, I'd advise you to spend your money on real food, because you have these two very technological organisms in your body already, called the liver and called the kidneys. And their literal job, one of their hundreds of jobs, is to purify and detoxify your system. That's what they're for. That's one of their major functions. And so when you stop ingesting the toxins, whether that's nanoplastics, whether that's forever chemicals, which are so ubiquitous now, I don't even know if we can avoid those. The inflammatory stuff in your food, the too many carbohydrates, I think immediately your body starts to detoxify itself. And you're basically, what you're doing by eating a proper human diet is you're giving it a chance to catch up. You're not poisoning your body anymore daily. And I think that's hugely important. And that's why some people, before they start a proper human diet, they feeling miserable. That's their baseline. They don't understand how miserable they really are. They've forgotten what feeling great even feels like. And when they start this way of eating, it gives them a chance to lower their levels of inflammation and to start to detoxify these chemicals. And so I think the vast majority of the detoxification is handled by your liver and your kidneys when you give them a chance to catch up. When you stop basically drinking the toxins out of a fire hydrant and you stop the ingestion, I think they immediately start to catch up. And you start to feel better. And so I'm not an advocate of any of the detox things out there. I don't think they work well enough to justify the expense.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
I know that you've tried. I know that you've really put in the effort, but you were given the wrong information. If you want good health until being very, very, very old, you need to eat this way.